Hello and welcome to Module 6. During Module 6, you will be submitting your group presentation, so please make sure to look at the document library for full instructions on how to submit your group presentations. Also during Module 6, you will be submitting the discussion questions for this week. Please make sure to choose 2 of the discussion questions to answer. I look forward to reading all of your group presentations and to looking at the answers for your discussion questions. Also during this module, you will be reading the chapter on feminist theory. It's a much shorter chapter than you've been reading, so I hope you will enjoy it. Feminist theory really looks to understand at the effect that culture and inequality has on our development. Feminist theory aims to understand the nature of gender inequality and the promotion of human rights, women's rights, interests, and the issues of the effect that society has on individuals. It aims to transform individuals and to change society. The way it understands pathology or psychopathology or disorders is simply by trying to understand how the dominant culture influences individuals, how it is that it disempowers individuals. And it looks to see how it is that people deviate from the norm. And sometimes the way the norm is defined is by the dominant culture. And in some ways it is the male culture. And so when you start reading about feminist theory, you will see that in many ways the inequality is something that's developed through how the society defines inequality. And in a lot of ways, when feminist theory defines inequality, it's something that's defined in society as early as, as when a child is born and the child starts to identify, the difference between, itself and its caretaker. And as early as 18 months, a child will start to develop its identity and be able to differentiate between, being female or being male. And there's a difference for the child, whether it's biologically a male or biologically a female, but it will also start to learn very quickly the differences between how a culture defines a female and how a culture defines a male, and what are all the different rules that identify a male and a female. And in many ways, feminist theory looks at how this definition provides this inequality between the genders. And in our culture, this inequality, females experience this inequality, and this disempowerment is something that must be looked at in therapy, or it's sometimes the inequality is disempowering, and the conscious awareness of this disempowerment, the conscious awareness of this leads to healing. So a feminist therapist might help and educate a client at looking at how this individual is disempowered in their relationship, or disempowered in their work, or disempowered in their community. And even though we look at, sometimes people think of this disempowered sometimes in a female, sometimes men also feel this disempowerment. So we're sort of this inequality. So some of the things you want to be looking at in the chapter, we talk about something as male as normative. And what that talks about is that society tends to, at least this society that we live in right now, looks at male as the norm, and anything that tends to deviate from the male being the norm, and most things being normal that are defined as male, tends to then be pathologized. There's a difference between maleness and femaleness, and I think the book does a great job of looking at the way we name things, even name sports. Like when we refer to tennis, we might refer to tennis and we may say that it's the men's team or the women's team, and so that definition of maleness and female. The dominant culture tends to, in feminist theory, they refer to dominant culture damaging those who don't fit in. And one of the criticisms of feminist theory is that they don't talk a lot about things, other communities or cultures or minority cultures that are also damaged by the effect of this dominant culture and people's inability to fit into the dominant culture. Feminist theory looks at then this awareness or consciousness of this awareness of this the influence of this dominant culture, and this consciousness having a healing effect. And a lot of this is done through education. Some of the therapy techniques is looking at the assessment, assessing the individual, asking questions about their self-esteem, asking their comfort levels on their gender roles. How comfortable are they experimenting with roles or gender roles that are thought of the opposite sex, their communication style. So some of the key roles, some of the key terms that are in the book that you might want to be, gender roles, key roles, some of the key terms that you'll be looking at in the book is biology is destiny, and that refers more to that, is it true that if you're born a male or you're born a female, that determines who you will become? And feminist theory will argue that if we need to change society, that in fact we shouldn't, that the way, if you're born a male or if you're born a female, it shouldn't determine who you will become. That there's also this hierarchy, and that there is more power in being a male than there is a female, and that we need to level that power out. And also in the therapy relationship, even in the therapy room, that there needs to be the shouldn't be so much power differentiation between the therapist and the client, and that should also be talked about. Also, consciousness raising is a term that's used in there, and that's just bringing awareness of the fact that society has this force on individuals, and looking at this force as part of what is influencing the person's depression or anxiety, or the reason the person came into therapy in the first place. Looking at gender roles, if a person comes into therapy, looking at, if two people are working in the household, how are the gender roles distributed, and how are they defining that as normative? Looking at power differentiation, defining that for themselves. And one important key term in feminist theory is looking at egalitarian relationships and trying to define what is equal and, in all cultures. So those are the key terms and the main things that you will find in the feminist theory chapter. I hope you will enjoy the reading. And again, I look forward to reading your group projects. Enjoy.